So the idea of Starship Rising came originally from, I heard a story from my sales agent who was talking about a submarine situation where somebody with a nuclear submarine could actually hold the entire United States at bay if he took over the submarine and would sit offshore and basically say, I'll send the missiles out of the submarine and blow up, the Capitol building or something like that, and nuke a few cities from the coastline on the East Coast. And I thought, that's a pretty serious threat. And so the idea kind of developed from there about if there was an oppressive federation and looking upon how they would be looking at trying to overthrow this terrible government, and Worthy, the main character in the film, overthrows the Starship and basically tries to hold the entire Federation at ransom. And so that's kind of the antithesis to the original idea for it. And then as we started developing the film, we looked at different ideas of, where does it go from there? Who's running the government and why is the government corrupt and everything. It's a little bit political, I guess. And I guess that's an intentional thing, but at the core of the story, it's really more about, one of my favorite films is Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. And it's got a lot of, a lot of the heart and soul of that movie in Starship. Another thing where I guess was probably a very, very heavy influence was Blake 7, which is a British science fiction television series from the 70s. And they didn't have a very big budget. It wasn't even like Doctor Who had a giant budget. Blake 7 had a tiny budget. And, in BBC terms, it's really tiny. And the saving grace of Blake 7 was the characters and how the characters interacted and how they, I guess, worked together, in a situation, worked against they all had faults, all had problems, but they worked together to against the Federation. So it's kind of my take on Blake 7 a little bit, because I like Blake 7 a lot and I keep watching it, and I guess I want to live in that universe. Obviously, it's completely different in reality of how it plays out, but it came from that moment. It came from that point of inspiration, I guess. And what I was doing with Starship 1, I think, was more so setting up the characters, setting up the events, and setting up a situation that makes an interesting turning point in the history of the future Federation. And Starship 1 is kind of the setup. And then Starship 2 is more so when the characters really come to life, where they really start to grow and develop. And you'll see that, obviously, Starship 2 is much more funny and friendly and there's much more conflict between the characters. And much more stuff goes on, I think, in a personal way. It's less high concept, more of a journey. And if I ever do a Starship 3 or 4, it'll continue the story and the narrative, and probably we'll see people develop and grow beyond their years and beyond their situations. So it's kind of an epic story. Another thing that I really love is Dune, and Dune for me was this big, sprawling saga. And I probably wasn't touching upon Dune very much in this film, but just the fact that it was a big story and it would go somewhere and things would change and develop, and people would become something special. That's kind of where it went for me. I come back to when I was a child, and world building for me was just, being a child and having these adventures. And the more adventures you have, the more you explore the world, the more things you learn about the world. And it kind of grows through a sort of an interesting reactive process. I try not to rip off anybody too much. You can't help it. If you're doing science fiction, you end up going down the certain path of Star Trek or Star Wars. You can't avoid it, or Serenity. You're going to hit a brick wall at some point. So I tried to do something a little different and authentic and original. But no matter what you do, you're going to hit you're going to hit somebody's stuff. There's too much science fiction out there. You can't do anything completely original without hitting something. And it's just how it is. It's a matter of then taking that world and trying to make it your own and letting it grow and develop in a natural way. And that's what I'm more interested in doing, seeing this world develop. And by the time you see Starship 2 and get to the end of that, the world is definitely nothing like Star Trek or Star Wars. It's completely different. And it's not like Serenity. It's its own thing. It's this very post-apocalyptic, I guess, feeling, and it's in a much more unusual place. So I'm excited where it's going to take us. And I just like the fact that it's a journey, that it's going somewhere. I don't like episodic things. I like stories that just progress, flow, and change. And that's always been my inspiration. This is not television. It's people want a story. People want to be entertained, and people want to go somewhere. Well, in Starship 1, definitely my favorite moment is when Worthy and General Gustav are yelling at each other across the Gulf of Space and just firing at each other, and it's back and forth. It's that level of energy and anger and emotion and passion that's just going on. I'm loving the fact that the characters grow and develop, and of course, Starries, Brooke Lewis, she grows up through her role and tries to become a captain of a starship, and everyone has a journey. I think in Starship 2, my favorite moment was really unexpected. Was when EJ was trying to be a little bit suave with Christina Moses, and he was showing her the weapons array, and obviously that scene is pretty funny when she kind of throws him across the room and stuff. And that was a nice thing with working with these actors in Starship, is there's so many good actors, and they brought so much of their own personality into the character. And again, a good example is EJ. I didn't know he had these amazing fighting skills, because he was on Jingle All the Way and Boy Meets World and a couple of other big TV shows and movies and stuff, like the high level things, and he had some amazing fighting skills in this production. So I like the fact that EJ was able to bring a little bit of his own skill set into his character, and it made the character very interesting and very unique and very unusual. He wasn't just the stereotypical guy, nerd guy flying the ship, or pilot, or navigating the ship. He was something special, and he grew up into the role nicely. It's just interesting. Same with Ralph Guzzo. He brought his own class and style, his Italian flavor to the production, and Raja Barudi, who I guess has that she actually is royalty. She's a royal person from, I think, the Q8 royalty or something like that. So she was pretty much able to draw upon a real life of living in a royal palace, and how people of high noble birth would act. And so she was a shoo-in to be that character. Who else do we think? Obviously, Darren Jacobs, who played Worthy. Now he was very linear in Starship 1. In Starship 2, I would wish I could have called it Worthy Gets Angry, because it's all about him. And I've gone through Starship 2, and I feel really bad for Darren because of what I put him through. But if you ever want to see his range, look at him in my movie Death Machine, and you'll see a completely different person, different character completely. And that's a proof of what a great actor he is. It's looking at the contrast of what an actor can do, and that makes me extremely happy. There's Emmy. Now, I originally was supposed to be doing a music video for her, and we just met up, and I thought, she looks really cool. And we were kind of like, I won't say brother and sister, but we were kind of, pretty much like brother and sister, I guess, when we met, because it was like we were very similar. We liked the same things, and we just hit it off straight away. Her and Joshua Paul Miller, who played the Rortak character. We all hit it off as a team, and I thought, nice people. And then I just threw them in front of the camera for a screen test, and it turns out they could all act. I was like, you guys done acting before, haven't you? He said, yes, we have. And I said, great. Well, do you want to be in a film called Starship? And then that's how it evolved. And Emmy and Josh were really good discoveries of mine, I guess. Though I'm sure other people had discovered them before me, but I was very happy to find them. And just brought a uniqueness to the production, and a genuineness to the roles, which made me happy. Another one, Christian Anderson. Now, it's funny. I saw Christian Anderson originally on The Office, the TV series. And I was watching, I thought, this guy's really funny. I like him a lot. And turns out he was a good friend of Darren. It's like, he came to the casting and said, dude, you got to see my friend. And he came in, it's like, I know you. I'm a big fan of what you did in The Office. I think you're really cool. And I was very surprised. And there he was. And we, again, hit it off. And he's naturally really funny and very, very clever. And it was very little directing needed to be done. He just had the character there. And I'm glad we killed him off in Starship 1, and there's not much of him in Starship 2 except in a flashback. But thankfully in Starship 3, if we do a Starship 3, there will be more of him. And that makes me happy because he was too good a character. And that's the problem. You write the script, you kill off a bunch of people, but then they're actually really, really cool characters, and you want to try to find a way to bring them back. So at least in science fiction, you can do this. You can resurrect people, and there is cloning. There is always cloning and everything else in these films. So it was just very warm, heartening to me that I had a good cast of people. I was very happy about this because a good cast is hard to find. And when you find it, you want to hold on to them and you want to keep working with them and let it grow and develop and take the character somewhere. So, and here's the thing. If you look at my films, some people peak early. I'm one of these people who peaks late in life, and I have in everything. So my films may start here, and they grow, and they grow, and they get better and better. And if you look at every movie I do, with the exception of about one, I think, but generally speaking, most of my movies improve and get better and get more successful. And I like that fact because it means I've got something to look forward to. I try to change my style in every movie as well. So if you look at Starship 1, it's a certain way. Starship 2 is a different flavor. Starship 3 will be a different flavor again. And Starship 4, who knows what that will be. But the idea is that we find a flavor, we find a direction, and we grow and we build upon it. So, you could, if you can enjoy Starship 1, I think you'll enjoy Starship 2 more. And I think 3 will be another level up from that. And it's a matter of just keep pushing the envelope and improving and self-improving. It's not like, other things where you get a big hit movie and then the sequels kind of suck. I want it to go the other way. I want it to grow and develop. Though I think that in the case of Planet of the Apes, 1 and 2 kind of stood side by side. And, they've all got their own kind of things. They sort of descended down a little bit, but I like the fact that 1 and 2 kind of stood together. Same with Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. Star Wars was here, and I thought Empire Strikes Back was an infinitely better film, even though I love Star Wars. So it's a matter of taking it and growing it and developing and trying to keep, any sort of thoughts about marketing out of the film and just trying to keep it more as this is a story about people and about characters. There's a lot about religion and women's rights within the film, and I'm trying to figure out where these notions came from within me. I don't know exactly. I do know that I've been in recent times, very, very offended by the fact that when you're watching these YouTube videos and they're executing women, and I won't say they, I don't mean Muslims, I don't mean Mexican cartels, I don't mean, Russian crazy people. I mean humans. Humans doing bad things to humans. And because of YouTube, some of the nastiest things in the world is now starting to leak out into the public sphere. And I find this horribly offensive that people would do this type of thing to another human being. And I've watched these things a couple of times, and it's not really my interest. I find this really horrible to look at, but I have seen this. And I remember one where they took this woman's head and they held her head, and she's alive, and they're just, and I'm watching it, and it's cutting into her throat, and I'm watching this to the point where her life ends, and what point does she just completely lose it? And I'm looking at the calmness of these people. Yes, they know their head's been cut off and they're about to die, but there's a weird calmness about them, about the person who's been executed. And there's not as much fear as I thought, but then there's a human body, it's human life, and there's a point where the life is ended. And I'm shocked when I see this. And it just shows you the sanctity and the purity of life and how special and how precious humanity is. Without this spark of life, we're slabs of meat. And so any culture that will oppress men or women in such a way that they want to kill them and, execute them for religious or for political reasons or whatever reasons, I'm at war with these types of people. I find these people terribly offensive. I find these people to be the enemy of mankind. And through my films and everything else, I'm forced to wage war with these people. You know, if I was maybe made a different way, I would be the guy out there trying to save people's lives and going out with guns and trying to execute the executors, or doing something, or being a badass person. I don't know if two wrongs make a right. I'm not sure what the answer to this is. But the point is, we see this, we recognize it. We must educate people, must make people aware that what they're doing is wrong. And I obviously believe a lot of people out there don't have a conscience, don't have an ability to feel or understand. And maybe that's why they feel they can just take a human life like this. It's so morally offensive to me that it's encompassing my life and my sleep and my day. And I am so pushed by this that I think through Starship, I showed an oppressive planet of women, under a religious regime. And it's not a Muslim regime, it's not a Catholic regime, it's not a Mormon regime or anything else, or Buddhist regime or anything else. It's a religious regime. It's a religion based around the worship of a leader, which is, generic and specific. And it's not trying to make a statement against religion. It's trying to make a statement about how people use that religion. And, obviously I have a lot of friends who are Muslims, and they're really good people, and they don't carry on this way. I have a lot of friends who are Christians, and they're really good people. And I have a lot of friends who are Christians who are really bad people as well. So it's about looking at who we are as humans and saying we have to make a point of standing up. And does that mean that women should rise up and overthrow their oppressors? Yes. Do they do that currently? Not so much. It always seems to be that the man aspect of rising up and doing something about oppression. And I think there's a point where women have to become more empowered and say, you have to take positive action. If you want your world to change, you have to now rise up and do things. And I guess that's my way, that's my message in Starship is, okay, if things are happening, if things are going down that are not so good, do something about it. Don't stand back. Don't stand there and just take a gun to the head or a knife to the throat. Do something beyond what being a victim is. And I think we've seen this in society. I think even during World War II, and I always thought this, why didn't the Jewish people and all the people, and not just the Jewish, the gypsies and the prisoners of war and all the oppressed people in the prison camps and the Catholics in the prison camps, why didn't these people rise up en masse and overthrow the Nazis? There was more prisoners than there were soldiers, and eventually if they all get as one big crowd, they would do something. And I think there's an oppression mentality that kind of pushes everybody down. And I'm always thinking about this. So I'm thinking there's a point where people have to stand up and rise up and fight. And yes, I do know there were some pockets of resistance during World War II, specifically, Jewish people and Dutch people and French people and, pockets everywhere fighting against the oppressors. But the majority of these people did not rise up. And I guess the examination of why they don't do this is the big question. And maybe it comes down to a select few with courage. Why would you sit back and let yourself die? What is in your head at that moment? And so that's, I guess for me, that's always the thing I'm trying to explore in Starship 1. Starship 2 goes off on a completely different journey. And, I like the fact that everything has its own flavor and texture. And I'm not passing judgment on anyone. I'm trying to explore the situation, and I'm trying to inspire and direct people into a certain way. It's just my conscience. And many people will disagree with me. And yes, have I received death threats about this? Yes. Have I received people telling me I'm wrong? Yes. And have people threatened to kill me because they think my viewpoint is incorrect? Of course, and that's the nature of it. But what's my position? Do I pay attention to these people? Do I ignore them? My feeling is I ignore them, and I push on and be a little bit private about my life and hope that they don't get in my way. But somebody has to be a voice. It's the same with Salman Rushdie. He, there was a point where he spoke out about what he felt was important, and he said the things he felt he had to say. And he had to, go on into hiding. I was 16, and my best friend's girlfriend, her dad ran a publishing company, and they were publishing a book called, I think it was In God's Name by David Yallop, who's a British author, and he wrote about how the Pope was assassinated. And he received tons and tons of death threats to the point where he had to go into hiding. And he went into hiding in Australia, where we were, and I got to meet up with him and discuss this with him. And he was in hiding because he basically told the story that, he put the theory forth that the Pope was assassinated in one of his books. And it kind of impacted his life in a very negative way, and everybody was getting death threats because people did not like the fact that, you're going to insinuate something about, a certain religious organization. So people will react badly. But I think that's the point, is that often they're hitting a nerve that, maybe your religion is not God, your religion is not the glorious thing that you think it is. It's not God, it's not something divine, it's man-made. And that's where people then become angry and people get twisted, because when they hear a rumor that maybe it's not God ordained, but it's man-made, they get offended. And I should know too. I was once a born-again Christian and believed, and I got very offended when people spoke about Christianity. I got very offended because I didn't like it when people would say that Christianity is a pile of bullshit or anything else. I came to my own decision many years later that it was probably not the sort of thing I wanted to be involved with. But at the time, I remember being very offended and being very angry that people. So I get it. But there's a point where you got to try and open people's eyes, and you got to do it slowly, inch by inch by inch by inch. And you look at the last 150 years, how things have changed. Slavery has pretty much, I won't say abolished, but has diminished. Women's rights have obviously, come up to a point where obviously women are still not equals, but it's getting closer and closer. And there's a point where a lot of women are more powerful than men, and that's scary for some people, but that's the way it should be. And things are changing, but it takes a generation or two to change things. You've got to start with your own voice and start with your own ideals and decisions, and take it from there. Should film just remain entertainment, or should it be something beyond that? Should it actually, challenge people? I did film school, and I studied documentary and the art of documentary making. And I think the first thing I learned was that it's all propaganda and actual bullshit. So documentaries can change the world, but often they're biased, and that's the nature of things. So anything you're going to do is biased towards a certain viewpoint. And I think if you're creating art, it should somehow challenge the viewer, somehow. It should find a way of challenging them either politically or emotionally or personally or spiritually or whatever it is. You have to challenge people somehow, otherwise it's not effective as art. I'm not claiming my films are great art or high art at all. I make movies because I like the entertainment factor. I like to be entertained. I make the sort of movies I want to see. So I'm doing it because I'm entertaining myself, let's just say. And we're on a small budget, so we're not always able to entertain to that level of, the Star Wars movies or anything else, but we are still striving for higher things than we are, would otherwise feel capable of doing. So, an artist has a choice to do whatever he wants. He wants to make a nice, pretty painting of a sunset. That's nice. But usually the good art, the art that's remembered, has a little story behind it, has a little political things behind it. It's like the Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa has a big story, and it's very interesting when you go into it. And great works of art have the hidden messages and the hidden meanings, and I like that. Obviously, you look at H.R. Giger, who passed away. There's so much message in that. It's ridiculous, but as a work of art, it's fascinating to look at, and it's a great visual medium. But his messages are so deep and profound. I like that about him. So I think the message will come out of your soul just by being who you are, and I think that's what's happening with Starship now. I didn't write Starship saying I'm going to make a message about women rising up and killing men. It just kind of evolved, and I didn't know that was the message that was going to come out. The message was supposed to be about, a guy with a spaceship and missiles holding the Federation at bay, but it developed beyond that. And I'm glad about the fact that, things will grow and develop. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of Starship 2 and 3. When you look back at it, say, what is the true message there? I can't predict the message. I don't try to push a message onto people, it just comes out. Every movie I do gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and gets more successful and is more polished. So, I'm looking forward to just continuing. I can't help but make movies. I have to make movies day after day after day. I'm just obsessed. I'm not one of these people who's going to retire. I'll die on set, I'm sure of this. Ultimately, when technology gets better, we're going to hit a level of perfection, if that ever comes. Ray Kurzweil is talking about this, the singularity that we'll one day attain, and we may be there in 50 years or 60 or 100 years, who knows. I think that makes for a boring movie. So in my universes, when I kind of build things that are kind of were once great and they're sort of going downhill. And with Starship, there was obviously a feeling that their empire was once more glorious, and it's now falling into decay. Maybe that's a reflection of our current society. Like when you build a universe or a world, like in Starship, you have to put things in that maybe are at fault and are decaying, and you have to show the faults of that universe so that people have something to struggle against. Otherwise, it's an incredibly boring universe that everything's smooth and white and lovely and generic. Kind of like Logan's Run, if you ever saw that movie. Obviously that world had a fault in the sense that in Logan's Run, when you hit, I think it's 30, whatever age it was, 28, I forget what age it was, but when you hit a certain age, you're killed off. And then everyone stays young and pretty and happy, and everything's clean. And of course, you can have sex whenever you want, you can get food whenever you want, you can do everything you want in your society, but you don't grow old because you're killed off. And that was the fault of that world. But until that point, that world was very boring and sterile. So it is boring to have a perfect world.